Hey, it's Keith from Outlaw Speed Shop, and welcome to the build-off between myself and Santa Slowdog. He approached me about doing a build-off, and I'm not a big fan of doing stuff like that. However, this one was pretty interesting, and essentially it's not really a build-off, it's more of a trade. He builds one, I build one, we send it to each other and unbox. So it's more like a gift, I guess. So I picked a theme. The theme was a hot rod mashup, and I'm starting with this 53 Chevy. So my goal was to take a 53 and mash it with a 55 gasser. And in theory, that sounded awesome. And for the most part, I mean, I've seen them done. I know it can be done. I just wasn't happy with the way it ended up going. So step one really was to take everything apart. You know, I had to cut the hood off, which is like a clear plastic. It's part of the windshield. And take the wheels off, open up the axle tube slots, and try to find some wheels that I thought were going to work and look good and fit the theme that I was looking for. Fortunately, I was able to find a few things. I ended up changing wheels halfway through for the front. But once I get it on there, I realized that these bigger wheels were a problem, and the interior rear section needed to be cut out and trimmed to be able to allow for a larger diameter wheel. And the best way I can do that is with a Dremel tool like usual. If you watch any of my videos, I do 90% of my work with a Dremel tool. And very rarely do I cut any fingers off. So here's me trimming it up, and I'm going to make them smooth. And I have to do a little bit of trimming, but what I found was I'd rather trim light and then have to trim extra than to trim too much. So I usually start off on the lighter side, and then I work my way, you know, by trial fitting, and I want just enough cut. You know I cut a lot of stuff, but I only cut what I need to cut. It just so happens I need to cut a lot most of the time. So, but this worked out pretty well, and it allowed me some flexibility. It's a little weird because of where the back seat was, but overall it fits okay. The only thing I got to do is, because the wheels are a little wider, I've got to go in and sand a little bit of the inside of the casting off and just thin things out a little bit more, so where behind the rear door, the side door hits the rear quarter panel. Other than that, it really wasn't that bad. I didn't have to dig too deep with my sanding disc. So here I am, still hopeful things are going to look good. So I have my 55 interior, and really all I need is the motor out of it if I'm going to use it. So I'm going to cut the motor out, I'm going to cut the grill off, and kind of see where I'm at and how it's going to fit. And at the same time, I got to cut the nose off of the 53 Chevy. Again, I did the same thing. I cut a little bit short, and then I ended up filing and trimming just a little bit once I had a final plan together. But here, it just didn't look good. So I went back to the drawing board, and I have this kit of different castings with motors that are fancy. And I pulled this one out, and I kind of like it. So I figured, screw it, why not? So I'm kind of trying to figure out what I'm going to do with it and how I'm going to do it. So taking everything apart is usually the first step, and then I will try to evaluate what I want to use, what I don't want to use, and once again, I'll cut short, and then trim as I need it. So not knowing 100% how things are going to fit, I'm cutting right in front of the rear post, just to get an idea of where I'm going to want to mount this and match it up with the existing 53 Chevy chassis, because that's essentially what I want to do. I don't need to replace the whole thing, so I just need to add it as an extension. So I got to cut the motor off of the donor, and again, I cut it long, trying to figure out how I'm going to do things. I don't want the nose to be like a top fuel dragster, but I want it sticking out past, the fenders a little bit. So again, it's a little bit of trial and error and cutting short and then trimming afterwards to make sure that I don't screw myself and have not enough material to work with. So I'm going to cut it right as it ends next to the motor and just get rid of the rear aspect of the donor car and work with that specifically. And it makes it easier, especially when you're trying to fit, just to do one thing at a time. And so you can see right here, I'm already taking off a little bit more from the motor. That was part of the base. And then I'm going to take a little bit more off of the actual donor chassis. As of right now, I still have the killer headers on there. I really like those, but unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to use them. It does interfere with the front fenders, and I could have chopped off the front fenders. I just didn't really want to. I was after a certain look. So here I'm kind of matching it up to see where I'm going to cut things and glue, because I'm almost at that phase where I can start gluing things together. So I got to get rid of the radiator support brace that's in between the two front fenders, and then grind down a little bit smooth where the radiator part of the body is, and just to make it a little bit more rounded, just to give it a little bit of a cool look. And I'm going to end up painting all that black inside the engine compartment, just to make sure you don't see any bare die cast. So here's the sad realization that I came to, that I have to cut off the headers, but it is what it is. It's unfortunate, but I'll use them on something else. It's one of those things that just had to be, and it had to be sacrificed for the greater good. So obviously the front part of the chassis of the 53 is going to get cut off, and that's going to be my mating point for the front end of the donor chassis. I'm going to file it down smooth, and then I'm going to glue everything together, use some baking soda just to make sure it's all hard and not going to break, and make sure I get a nice solid surface to adhere to, because the last thing you want to do is pick this thing up and have it fall in half. And especially if you're going to be manhandling it, multiple times, putting wheels on, putting it together, take your time and do it right. So you can kind of see here me finally fitting it and trying to figure out what parts I want to keep. Works out really, really well, surprisingly. So you can kind of see here as I put things together, the front end's attached. It's nice and solid. And I'm still undecided about the exhaust. I still have my headers hanging around just in case. But the other thing you'll notice is on the front of this chassis, on the new donor, because it's a casket, there was like a bat on the front. I had to grind that down, and then I cut some grooves, and I have these jewelry skull helmets, and I just cut a groove on each side so that fits in up against the moon tank. And then I'll primer that and paint that up. But that kind of gives it that front end of a bone shaker type of look. And I needed to get rid of some of these. I have a whole case of them, so it works out well. And really, I'm just going to use some surface primer for the different aspects. I got gray, white, and black. I wanted to keep the paint job on this casting because I just think it's cool. It's one of their better paint jobs with the flames and everything else. And I just think it harkens back to the 50s and 60s custom culture. So I wanted to keep that aspect of it. And I was lazy. No, I really think it looked cool. So really at this stage, it's just painting and touch-ups and trying to get as many details as I can to make the original casting, just make a little bit better. So once again, I want to thank Santa Slowdog for getting me in. I've been kind of a slump lately, and I've been working on some other things that are taking up a lot of my time, and it felt good to get back in the swing of things and build. And I've got so many projects on the bench I got to get back to, and I keep putting it off because I'm working on something else. And this I had no choice because I gave him my word. So I'm glad I did, because it got me back down in the basement working on stuff, and it felt good to build something once again. And I got all these crazy ideas in my head, and I can't wait to get down there and start working. But I probably got another couple weeks to go before I can feel comfortable that everything else is all set and I can go down there uninterrupted. So, plus it's the holidays, it's Christmas, and you know how that goes. So, family comes first, and diecast is a close second, though. So really, I'm just going to go through my Army Painter paints. I've got a whole ton of them. I got the latest kit that came out, and I really love these things. So works out well, goes on excellent, and you can mix it, any of the paints together and make any colors you want. So I just decided to go with like a sandy beige interior, almost like a dark leather, just to give it something different. You can't really see it with the chopped roof and everything, but it doesn't hurt to try to hit all the details, because you never know. So whenever you're building a project, just, take time. I always go through and try to have at least some sort of a vision in my head, but I'm not married to it. If I was, then this project really would have been a cluster, because, I really had this idea about a 55 or 53 gasser, but there was two things. One, I didn't like the way it fit. Two, it really didn't fit the definition of mashup. So I was willing to sacrifice my main idea and just roll with it. Again, they're toy cars. It's not, the end of the world if something's not coming out right. So it's easier just to roll with it and take it as a challenge and see what else you can come up with and build and create. Not every idea, the execution is going to be exactly what you want, but with every time that happens, you learn something. You learn a way to get out of your mistakes, I guess you could say. So that's essentially what I'm trying to tell you, is that not, just because may not be going well, or it didn't end up the way you wanted, as long as you learn something, it really doesn't matter. Plus, again, we're just doing this to have fun. It's not a matter of who has what skill. It's all about just going and doing what you can do. There's people out there that are so crazy good that I could spend every day, 24 hours a day doing this and never be half as good. I can't compare myself to them. I compare myself to my last build. And at the end of the day, as long as I'm happy. So I found some 3D printed headers, but they were still hitting the inside of the fender well. So I took a couple pieces of styrene, glued that on as almost like a spacer, a header spacer, and it worked out perfect for both sides. So this is all the parts. You can see those headers are now painted. Everything's ready to go together and see what we end up with. I was pretty happy with the way this came out. It's just something different. I like to push the envelope a little bit. Sometimes it's a win, sometimes it's not. But in the end, I'm happy with the way this build came out, and I hope Santa Slowdog enjoys it. At the filming of this video, I haven't opened his yet, so it'll be interesting, and there'll be an unboxing video for that. This is the final product. I hope you guys like it. Maybe grab some inspiration out of it. I will catch you on the next one. Don't forget, check out his video. There'll be a link down below.